Back in the 5th grade, I sat by this girl named Amanda. She was odd, to say the least. Amanda had an unusual habit that went beyond mere eccentricity. She was always chewing gum. And I don't mean the occasional piece like the rest of us, but she had a constant wad of bubblegum in her mouth, which she would chew with a slow, deliberate motion. The strange thing about Amanda wasn't just her perpetual chewing, but what happened with the gum itself. She claimed she never needed to get new gum because her piece never lost its flavor. We were all sure that she was just making it up, or maybe had an endless stash hidden somewhere. Then one day, during a particularly boring history lesson, Amanda turned to me with her wide, unblinking eyes and said, "Want to see something really cool?" Before I could nod or shake my head, she pulled the gum out of her mouth, stretching it impossibly long, like taffy. But it wasn't just the elasticity that was unsettling. The gum seemed to shimmer with an unnatural, almost luminescent pink glow. Somehow curiosity got the better of me, and I touched it. It felt warm and alive, pulsating slightly under my fingertips. Amanda giggled, a sound that was too high-pitched, echoing oddly in the classroom. Then she whispered, "It's not just gum, you know. It's something else." From that day, things got weirder. Kids who annoyed Amanda started having accidents. Tommy, who once threw a paper ball at her, found himself unable to speak without his words turning into a sticky, chewy mass in his mouth. And when Sarah, the class bully, pushed Amanda in the hallway, she woke up the next day with her bedroom floor covered in a thick layer of bubblegum, trapping her in her bed. Nobody believed these events were connected to Amanda until the day of the school science fair. Amanda's project was simply titled Gum. When it was her turn, she stood before the class, pulled out her ever-present gum, and blew a bubble. But this bubble didn't pop. It grew, and grew, enveloping her hand, then her arm, and before anyone could react, it encased her entirely. The bubble shimmered with that same eerie glow, and then with a sound like a sigh, it floated upwards, through the ceiling as if it was nothing more than mist. Amanda was gone, leaving behind a classroom in chaos, and a legend that would haunt our school for years. Teachers and parents tried to dismiss it as a collective hallucination or an elaborate prank. But those of us who were there knew better. We knew Amanda wasn't just odd, she was something else, something not of our world, using bubblegum as a conduit or perhaps as a disguise. Years later, I sometimes see ads for a new brand of gum that promises eternal flavor and a bubble like no other. Every time I do, I can't help but shudder, wondering if somewhere in another classroom, another Amanda is sitting and chewing. And I wonder if that person is just waiting for the right moment to reveal her true self through a seemingly innocent piece of bubblegum. One time my family went to this bubblegum factory and museum, or maybe it was just a museum, I don't really remember. I don't think it was our main destination, more like a waypoint or something we saw a sign for while driving on the highway. The day was overcast, with a nagging drizzle that made everything feel damp and sticky, much like the subject of the museum itself. Upon arrival, the building looked old, almost abandoned, with peeling paint and a sign that flickered "Bubblegum Wonders." The neon light buzzed like a trapped fly. My parents thought it would be fun, a quirky stop to break the monotony of our road trip. Inside, the air was sweet, almost cloyingly so, with an underlying hint of something chemical that you could taste at the back of your throat. The museum was deserted except for us and an overly enthusiastic guide named Mr. Chuli, whose smile seemed too wide for his face. His teeth were also stained an unnatural pink, which was rather off-putting to say the least. He showed us around, his stories about the history of bubblegum filled with eccentric characters and curious incidents, like how the first bubblegum was supposedly made from a failed attempt at synthetic rubber during a particularly harsh winter. Eventually the tour led us to the interactive experience room, where Mr. Chuli encouraged us to try the special blend, a gum that he claimed was still in the experimental phase. My younger sister, always the adventurous one, popped a piece into her mouth without hesitation. The rest of us followed suit, intrigued by the promise of an unforgettable flavor experience. At first it was delightful, the taste evolving from sweet to sour, then to flavors I couldn't even name. But then something changed. My sister made a face, her chewing slowed, and she started to look worried. She tried to spit it out, but the gum seemed to stick, stretching out like a web, trapping her hands as she tried to pull it away. Mr. Chuli's smile grew even wider, if that was possible, and he chuckled, "Isn't it something? The more you chew, the more it wants to become part of you." Panic set in as we realized we couldn't stop chewing. The gum was expanding, growing stickier and more aggressive. My father tried to speak, but his words were muffled, his lips barely moving, sealed by the expanding mass of gum. The room, which had just moments ago seemed so innocent, now felt like a trap. The walls lined with images of children happily blowing bubbles now seemed grotesque, their smiles mirroring Mr. Chuli's. The guide's demeanor shifted entirely. His eyes gleamed with a manic joy. "You see," he explained, as if giving a lecture, "this blend was designed not just to be chewed, but to consume. It feeds on movement, on life. The perfect bubblegum doesn't end with a pop. It goes on forever." We were stuck, literally, in a nightmare of pink goo. My mother managed to pull out her phone, her fingers sticking to the screen as she dialed for help, but the gum stretched over it, absorbing the device with a sickening squelch. As the gum began to cover our noses, making it harder to breathe, Mr. Chuli simply watched, his fascination evident. But then, whether by luck or fate, my sister, through her struggles, discovered that cold water from the drinking fountain near her could solidify the gum momentarily, enough for her to pull some away. With desperate teamwork, we made our way to the fountain, using the water to free ourselves bit by bit. It was a race against time, as the gum seemed to adapt, becoming resistant to the cold. We escaped, but not all of us were unscathed. The gum left marks, both physical and psychological. That night, and for many nights thereafter, I dreamt of being enveloped by an endless sea of bubblegum, hearing Mr. Chuli's laughter as I was consumed. We never spoke of it again. In the museum, it disappeared from the maps and from the highway signs, as if it was never there to begin with. But sometimes, when I pass a candy store or see someone carelessly blowing a bubble, I feel a chill. And I remember the day when bubblegum was not just a treat, but a living, hungry entity. This happened pretty recently, and I still can't explain it. I had just gotten my Asus RTX 4090 and was literally about to finish assembling my new gaming rig. My excitement was palpable. My room was littered with packaging, screwdrivers, and the static smell of new electronics. I reached for the last piece, the GPU, when I noticed a small, oddly colored packet wedged in the corner of the static bag the GPU came in. It was bubblegum, branded with some obscure logo I'd never seen before, Gumtech. Curiosity got the better of me. I mean, who puts bubblegum in with a graphics card like that? At first I shrugged it off, thinking it might be some new marketing gimmick, and popped the gum into my mouth. It tasted unusual. Not bad, just different, with a lingering aftertaste like static electricity. As I chewed, I installed the GPU, connected all the cables, and powered on my system. The BIOS screen flashed by, but then things got weird. Instead of the desktop, my screen filled with a swirling, pulsating pattern of colors that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my chewing. Freaked out but fascinated, I stopped chewing. The screen froze, and I started again, and then the colors danced once more. That's when I noticed my reflection in the monitor. My eyes had taken on the same swirling colors as the screen. Panicking, I spat out the gum, but the screen didn't return to normal. Instead, a game booted up by itself. Not just any game, but something I never installed or even heard of, GumQuest.exe. The graphics were hyper-realistic, more real than anything even the RTX 4090 should have been capable of. I was in the game, literally. My room had morphed into a digital landscape where everything was made of or related to bubblegum. Trees were twisted pink and blue, rivers flowed with liquid gum, and the sky had a chewy texture. As I explored, creatures made of sentient bubblegum blobs attacked me, their sticky forms trying to envelop me. Every time I fought back, pieces of my own digital avatar turned into gum, slowly, chew by chew, making me part of this world. The more I played, the less I remembered about my real life. My only goal was to find the kernel of original flavor, some artifact within the game that supposedly could reverse the gum transformation. Days seemed to pass in the game, but when I finally reached the kernel, it was guarded by a massive beast, a grotesque mix of chewed gum and discarded tech parts. The battle was completely surreal. Each of my attacks made it stickier, and each of its blows made parts of me stretch like gum. In a desperate move, I used the last of my non-gum limbs to throw the gum I'd been chewing at it, which I'd somehow still had in my digital pocket. The beast absorbed it, and then froze, glitched, and exploded into a shower of pixels and gumdrops. With the kernel in hand, the world around me started to dissolve, the gum landscape peeling away back to my room. I awoke in my chair, the taste of that strange gum still on my lips, the screen displaying my desktop as if nothing had happened. Now, whenever I game, there's this nagging feeling at the back of my mind, like I've left a piece of myself in that sticky digital realm. And every so often, when the room's quiet enough, I swear I can hear the faint sound of chewing coming from somewhere inside my computer. My sophomore year in college was shaping up to be rather boring. Not even that difficult from an academic sense, but just like a bunch of BS classes combined with my complete lack of social life. That was, until I met Leela in the campus cafeteria, her presence as sticky and unavoidable as the bubblegum she was always chewing. Leela had this way of blowing bubbles that was almost hypnotic. She'd lean in close, her breath smelling sweet, the pink gum stretching and expanding between her lips in a slow, deliberate display. I found myself watching her, not out of interest at first, but something akin to fascination mixed with an unexplainable dread. One evening, as the autumn chill began to seep into the bones of the old campus, she sat next to me while I was studying. "Want some?" she offered, holding out a piece of gum. Her eyes had this playful yet predatory glint. "Sure," I replied, taking it, not realizing the sticky web I was about to step into. From then on, Leela was everywhere. In the library, at parties I barely remembered agreeing to attend, and always with that gum. The more I chewed, the more I felt entwined with her. The gum seemed to change flavor, becoming sweeter and more intense, almost intoxicating. And with each piece, our encounters grew more charged. One night, in the dimly lit corner of a frat house, the music thumping like a heartbeat, she cornered me. The bubble she blew this time was enormous, almost the size of her face, before it popped, pieces sticking to her lips which then curved into a smile. "Ever wonder what happens to the gum after you chew it?" she whispered, her lips brushing my ear, sending shivers down my spine. I laughed nervously, trying to shake off the eerie feeling. "It's just gum, right?" "Is it?" she teased, her fingers playing with the strand of my hair, pulling me closer. Her kiss tasted of artificial strawberries and something darker, something forbidden. That night, things escalated. The gum, our kisses, the touches, it all became a blur. But there was also an edge to it, a sense that I was being consumed, not just in the throes of passion, but in a more literal, terrifying sense. Days later, I noticed things. People who chewed Leela's gum started acting strangely, becoming overly attached, almost obsessed with her. And then they disappear, only to be seen again looking drained and empty, like they'd lost something vital. Eventually I confronted Leela in her dorm room, which smelled overwhelmingly of bubblegum. "What are you doing to them? And to me?" I demanded. She just smiled, blowing another bubble. "Oh, it's just a bit of fun," she said, but her eyes told a different story, dark and old, older than any student should be. "You see, I feed on desire, on that sweet, sticky want. And what's more desirable, more binding, than bubblegum?" Her revelation was chilling. The gum was her lure, her way to bind people to her, to feed on their longing, their life force, wrapped in the guise of innocent flirtation. I tried to leave, to spit out the gum, to cleanse myself of her influence, but the flavor lingered, her laughing echoing in my ears. Every piece of gum I saw from then on was a reminder, a small chewy piece of horror, of a desire that could stick to you and entrap you, until there was nothing left but the taste of artificial sweetness and the echo of a pop. I still remember riding in bumper cars as a teenager. There would usually be gum stuck inside the car somewhere, and while it could sometimes be annoying, I never really gave it a second thought. That was, until the summer I turned 17, at the old carnival by the pier, where the salty air mixed with the sweet scent of cotton candy and the faint underlying aroma of something darker. It was there that I met Leo, the guy who ran the bumper cars. He had this intense gaze, the kind that seemed to chew on you with eyes alone, sticky like the gum he was always prying off the cars with a strange, almost loving care. His smile was wide, full of charm, but there was something off about it, like his sweetness was just flavoring to cover something bitter. One night, as the carnival lights flickered like they were about to give up, Leo handed me a piece of bubblegum. "Try this," he said, his voice as smooth as the caramel apples sold 2 stalls down. "It's special." The gum was an odd shade, not quite pink and not quite red, and it had a peculiar texture, almost like it was alive between my fingers. I hesitated, but popped it into my mouth anyway, caught under the spell of his expectant look. The flavor exploded, sweet at first, then turning strangely intimate, like a whisper against the skin. As days went by, I found myself returning to the bumper cars, not for the ride, but for that gum, and for Leo. Each piece he gave me seemed to bind me closer to him, an invisible string pulling taut. The gum started to taste like his kisses, which I hadn't experienced, but somehow knew. It was addictive, each chew pulling me deeper into a web I couldn't see. Then, one humid evening, with the air thick as if it was made of syrup, Leo invited me to see something special in the back of the bumper car tent. My heart raced, not just with fear, but with an inexplicable excitement. Behind the tent, in a dimly lit area, I saw them. Figures made of gum, life-sized, eerily detailed, almost human, but with something horribly off. They were posed in various states of twisted embrace, their faces contorted in silent screams or maybe moans. Leo watched me, his eyes gleaming with a mix of pride and something far more sinister. "Isn't it beautiful?" he whispered, his breath smelling like that odd gum. "They're my collection. People who got too close and too curious." My heart thudded painfully. I realized the gum was not just gum. It was a piece of them, of him, of whatever dark magic or science he wielded. Each chew had been a step towards becoming part of this grotesque gallery. I tried to run, but my limbs felt heavy, like they were turning to gum themselves. Leo's laugh was the last thing I heard before everything got sticky, stretching like taffy, pulling me into a kiss that was both terrifying and, in some twisted way, the culmination of all the tension that had been building between us. They say when you chew gum, you're supposed to spit it out before it loses its flavor. But as I felt my essence blending into the chewy mass, becoming one with Leo's macabre art, I realized some flavors, once tasted, are impossible to spit out. And in this carnival of horrors, I was becoming the sweetest, most terrifying bubble of them all. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed the stories tonight. Feel free to leave a comment or introduce yourself, or even if not, I hope you had a good time. Take care.